This is going to be a Peeping Caddis. I need some white wool, that's just knitting wool. It's got to be an acrylic or a synthetic knitting wool. Burn the end to melt the fibres and give you that little head of the grub. The hook is a heavyweight wet fly hook. It's a B175 or equivalent. I've got a tungsten bead at the head and I'm using a 70 denier or 80 thread. The colour of the thread doesn't really matter, I just pick a thread to match the dubbing colour. The wool is going to get tied on top of the hook shank as a tail, and it represents the grub and the head of the caddis sticking out of its case. So I'm just going to tie that down the length of the hook shank, and I'm going to tie it so that the underbody is hard up against the bead. I put the beads on so the cupped side is at the eye, and then make the underbody hard up against the back of the bead to jam it in place. So that's the first layer there. Partridge hackle, doesn't matter the size really, smaller's good, doesn't matter the colour, can be grey, can be brown, barred like this. Strip off the stuff at the bottom and then tie it in by the tip, and again that gets tied in for the length of the body. I'm keeping the underbody regular, I'm not being over fussy about the underbody. A few wraps at the bead, I'm checking to see if it's locked. It's not quite locked yet, soon will be though. Then the thread back to the bead. That gives me room to manipulate the partridge hackle. I'm using hackle pliers, and then I'm going to sweep the fibres back so that I fold the hackle, and I'm going to give it about 2 turns right at the back of the body. It's button up against each other. You don't want to over hackle this. These are supposed to be legs, not it's nothing to do with making the fly buoyant or anything. And then just take the thread back. All the time I'm firming up and smoothing the underbody. Catch the stem in and bring it forward. It doesn't really matter if the stem comes forward, but it's got to be tied in securely. And bring it forward to the bead. And trim away the stem. By this stage the bead should be locked in place. If it's not, I'll build up some thread, but I think, as I remember, this was locked in place. Yeah. And then firm down the body, smooth the body. I'm trying to fill up any little valleys that I see, and make a firm underbody for the dubbing. Now the case here, it's a case around the grub. What you're seeing is the legs, represents the legs and the body of the grub sticking out of the case. And the dubbing has to be, the dubbed body has to be thicker than the grub, in my head anyway. So I'm going to give it 2 layers of dubbing. This is a small amount of a mixed dubbing that I'm putting onto the thread, and then spreading it on the thread and twisting it one direction only all the time and tightening it up. Then if I catch it round the body and then twist it, it'll tighten up more, and then dub a level body, touching turns, dub a level body along the hook shank, and cover the roots of the partridge hackle. This is a mix of sparkly stuff from Hen's Spectra and just hare's mask. Now I've ended there so that I can put on more dubbing. The idea of the mix of dubbing is to make something that looks like the the bits of stuff that the caddis grubs use to make their case. They use detritus from the riverbed, sticks and bits of sand and what have you. And I've used these two dubbings. You can use others if you prefer, but I'd suggest using two different textures and two different colours so that you get this sense of bits. It pleases me. I don't know if it pleases the fish, but it pleases me. And then wrap forward a second layer tight, as tight as you can, all the way to the bead. Finish behind the bead and whip finish. Tighten everything down. Cut away the thread, and a drop of varnish at the bead just secures the thread. It's just stop the thread untying. Now I'm going to trim some of the straggly fibres that are sticking out of this, because the case is a case. It's not meant to be struggling limbs of an insect, which is where dubbing normally would be. You'd want a shaggy dubbing. So I'm just going to trim away some of the fibres to make it look a bit more regular, above and below. It's not a big thing, it's just tidy it up. And that's the fly finished. It's a very simple fly, really. Good fly, fish's head down. This is a hare's mask and spectra dubbing. The hare's mask is as you can see, fairly standard dried natural hare's mask, and I use these two to make the mixed dubbing. There's a couple of ways I can take dubbing off a hare's mask. I can cut it off with the scissors, or I can scrape it off with that dubbing rake. That's a fancy dubbing rake, but simpler metal dubbing rakes are available. You use that by simply scraping it. It cuts and rips the fibres. So you just scrape it through the hair and you get a mixed dubbing straight off the skin. It works on most types of fur animals. The other way is simply to cut off tufts, and then you've got to mix it. You've got to break the, you've got to mix the fibres up. You get different colours and textures of a hare's mask. You get the short ear, which is spiky. You get dark stuff between the eyes, and you get pale or ginger from the cheek. And a thing people should note is this is a hare. The underfur's white and it's a brown face. If that was a rabbit, much smaller face, it would be grey with a grey underfur. Hare is a completely different proposition. So I'm cutting tufts from different places. I'll take one from the cheek, one from between the eyes, the darker stuff there, and just make a little pile of these. And I've got that's my natural dubbing. And then I'm going to take a tuft of dark stuff from the hen's selection. And I'm going about 50-50. The mix, you can adjust the proportions of the mix as you like, but 50-50 should guarantee that I'll have plenty of both in a pinch, that I'll wrap around the thread. And then a bit of other colours just to make up the quantity. I'm using the sort of colours I think you're going to find on the riverbed, so browns and greens and what have you. Just small amounts. And now the mixing is, you can't just dub with that, you've got to mix it, you've got to blend these two. And it's a sort of pull it apart and then put it on top of each other and pull it apart and repeat until the two fibres are blended, and until the stuff is in a state where you can use it. And you can see there's a layer of little bits of junk falling out, useless stuff for dubbing. And you just keep doing that. You just keep pulling these apart, putting them on top of each other and pulling them apart until the blend is achieved. And you can adjust the proportions as you want. This is ideal for small quantities for use on your tying bench. If you were mixing bigger quantities, I'd use a different method, but this is fine. That's mixed enough.